All right, the Washington Redskins have broken. I like that. We know what that's from. The source also told Schefter it's not a foregone conclusion that the Redskins would use the franchise tag on Cousins. If they used the tag on him, it would cost them approximately $20 million based on current projections. Skip, how much is Kirk Cousins actually worth?
Stephen A. Smith, I'm going to give you my gut feeling at this moment. I believe the Washington Redskins are about to overpay for Kirk Cousins. I believe if they feel forced to go ahead and give him franchise quarterback long-term money, which I believe they will be forced to do because he could become, as you know, a free agent, hit the market. Aren't many quarterbacks on that market. If they do that, they will always be just a little bit disappointed. Kirk Cousins, to me, is not a top 10 quarterback. He's not that guy. He's not the leader of a franchise long term. He's not a guy who could ever contend, to me, for a seasonal MVP award, let alone a Super Bowl MVP award. Now, you could come back and say, well, gee, if you can build a Denver Broncos defense that carried Peyton Manning to a Super Bowl championship, you got me. Not sure that's going to happen in D.C., but it could. But I'll be the first to admit that this is a close call for me, and I'm going to disqualify myself in part. As you well know, going into that draft, I was an RG3 fan. So I've had a little bit of resentment of Kirk Cousins because, as you know, he was taken the fourth round of that same draft, and it felt like he was pitted against my man, Robert Griffin III. Mike Shanahan was said to have loved Kirk Cousins in that draft, maybe even a little more than he was forced to love Robert Griffin III. I respect the heck out of Mike Shanahan. I've spoken to him about this. He loves him some Kirk Cousins. He believes Kirk Cousins is the answer in D.C. and that he is a franchise quarterback, so who am I to defy the great Mike Shanahan? But I'll tell you, in the first 15 games that I watched Kirk Cousins, I didn't see much. I saw 24 touchdowns to 27 interceptions, and I saw a guy who in the biggest moments for those D.C. teams, those Redskin teams, threw too many wrong place, wrong time interceptions. But I must admit, over the last 10 games, hard to argue, with 23 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. Yes, Kirk, we like that. How can I not like that? Because they won 5 of their last 6 to win the division. The only loss coming, of course, to my Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football, if I might throw that in. But then we came to a home playoff game, and now I'm being hypercritical, but we're talking about giving this man long-term franchise money. I thought Kirk Cousins, after a fairly good start in that game, they jumped up 11-0 on Green Bay Packers. I thought he slowly but surely turned back into Kirk Cousins. His overall QBR for the playoff game was 31. His QBR in the fourth quarter was 2, as in 2 on a scale of 0 to 100. So that's that guy. And I think that will always be that guy. So to me, it would be hard for me to close my eyes and pay him the big money unless I thought I could just stand my ground and he would take sort of middle or upper middle level money. And I don't know exactly what that would be, Stephen A., but I don't want to give him top dollar. That's my gut feeling.
Well, I know it's a debate show, and we're starting off on the wrong foot because I completely agree with everything that you said. I don't think he warrants it at all in terms of what we know and what we've seen him to be worth. Obviously, passing for 4,166 yards, 29 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, a QBR of 70, completing 69.8% of his passes. That's phenomenal in terms of stats. But when you really get into it, Skip Bayless, he didn't beat a single team with a winning record this year.
Yep.
Not one. Of all the 9 victories that the Redskins have had, not one team had ended the year with a winning record. Every single victory for the Washington Redskins was against 2015's version of mediocrity. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, if you're going to pay Kirk Cousins, it has to be about his body of work. Prior to this 9-7 season, his record was 2-7 as a starting quarterback in this league. over a 3-year period. In 9 starts, he was 2-7. So you have one decent year, and all of a sudden, the truck needs to be brought out to, a boatload of money to give you. I don't think so. Then we also have to take into account the fact that people didn't see him coming the way they're going to see him coming now that he's clearly the starting quarterback for the Washington Redskins. That's number 3. Number 4, like you harbored some resentment towards him because of the fact that your guy RG3 was pretty much sandbagged with his arrival. Well, I harbor resentment towards Kirk Cousins through no fault of his own, by the way, for an entirely different reason. It's through the fault of Jay Gruden, who I believe clearly insulted RG3. And it resonated so profoundly that I'm telling you right now, there are still people in Chocolate City that don't like Jay Gruden too much because of the manner in which he treated RG3 in terms of his specifics, how he dissected and picked apart the mistakes that RG3 made in a way we haven't seen a head coach do to a quarterback I don't ever recall. And yet he coddled Jay Cutler time and time and time again. So we certainly see the discrepancy there. We don't like that either. And then but you look at it all and you just say he's not worth it. Here's the best argument that you could make for Kirk Cousins. Tony Romo, Jay Cutler. When you think about $18 million to $20 million that these guys are averaging a year, why wouldn't Kirk Cousins be worth that when those guys are getting paid? Not really so much Tony Romo, more so Jay Cutler, considering the money that he signed for, $126 million, I think about $40 million in guaranteed, an average of about $20 million a year. How in God's name is Jay Cutler getting that money, but we're going to justify denying it to Kirk Cousins? So I certainly understand it from that situation. Then you've got the camaraderie issue. When you look at whether it's a Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon, or Jordan Reed, who's a bad boy, Alfred Morris in the backfield, an offensive line that's accustomed to blocking for him now, the familiarity, the cohesiveness, that's not something that you can teach. And this is a Redskins franchise that desperately needs something like that, Skip, because looking at their numbers, do you realize it's been 25 years? 25 years, meaning since 1991 that the Washington Redskins actually won more than 10 games in a season. They have not won over 10 games in a season since 1991. I mean, when you look at it from that perspective, you just got to step back and say to yourself, you know something? Let's look at the Redskins and let's think about, a long-term solution, and continuity may go a long way for them where that's concerned. Again, I'm a bit reluctant and hesitant and apprehensive about giving Kirk Cousins that money because I totally agree with you. He's not that guy. He's not a guy I see being the MVP of the Super Bowl. He's not that kind of a difference maker or anything like that. The problem is the league is so rife with mediocrity at the quarterback position. And that mediocrity is still getting paid so handsomely. Why should Kirk Cousins not be the latest in that line? That's his argument.
Okay.
It's the only argument he can make.
By the way,